for public comment, Krista?
No, I didn't receive any.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's 3:30. Call the meeting of the Executive Committee of the Dunn County Board of Supervisors, Wednesday, October 6th, meeting to order. Let the roll show everyone is here except for Supervisor Steen and Supervisor Quinn. And we have many other staff joining us today. You think we need to call a roll?
No.
Okay. Approval of the minutes, September 8th meeting.
Move to approve.
Supervisor Morehouse moves, Supervisor McCullough seconds. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. We have no public comments, so we will move right into the staff report of the county manager.
Thank you. You have in your packet of materials the draft agenda for the October 13 county board meeting. As we've talked about in the past, that is 1 week earlier than usual. That is for notification requirements for the November meeting where we have to hold the public hearing for the budget. Turning to that draft agenda, you'll see that I'm going to give an update on COVID. COVID is unfortunately spiking here in Dunn County, so it's appropriate to bring that up. We will review the purchase orders as always of more than $40,000. And we're going to add an item here that's not on the draft, but in discussions with the Corporation Council. We've recently gotten news and direction on the opioid litigation settlement proposal. So we want to update the county board on that. So we'll add that under county manager, and I will turn to Corporation Council to give that update. Is there anything else that members of this committee would like to see on the county manager's report at the county board meeting? If not, moving on to reports of departments. I jotted down Dunn County Housing Authority normally in our normal schedule. However, that report by the Dunn County Housing Authority is done in January. I don't recall if we did it this past January, and I must admit, I don't recall why it's on there for this month. I've not reached out to them, but perhaps one of you who does work with the Housing Authority knows that or has heard that they want to make a report. If not, we can leave that off. Reports of the departments, again, more. All we do in October, I'm looking over at my schedule in case you're wondering. All we do in October is the budget and levy report.
Mr. Chair,
Dave, Supervisor Tripp.
Supervisor Tripp?
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The Housing Authority normally prepares an annual report for the annual meeting of the Housing Authority, which normally is in November. So we will be holding our annual meeting in November this year. Probably be easiest for Tammy if the report to the county board was either in November or sometime after then.
Yeah, January.
Yeah.
Okay. I will remove that from the agenda.
Somebody gonna inform Tammy?
I will make a note to call Tammy to clarify that.
Thank you.
While you were discussing this, I looked up the agenda from last January's county board meeting, and that is listed as as a departmental report given at that time
Mhm.
in January of 2000 or 2020. I'm sorry. I didn't look in 2021, but
Okay. We will, from this committee, under reports of committees, this committee, we will cover the proposed fiscal year 22 budget levy, which we're going to discuss later in this meeting. And then you see the other items that are coming from the other standing committees, which will be covered by the chairs in reports from their committees. Finally, we will note that the next county board meeting after October's will be November 9. That is the statutorily mandated time at which we must conduct the public hearing for the budget. So that is a Tuesday, November the 9th. That's what I have for the draft agenda. Is there anything else that anyone feels should be added?
Doesn't look like it.
If that's the case, I just wanted to jot a note here to make sure. Don't forget to check on 20-year retirements that we might need to note on the agenda. The next thing we want to cover is the draft fiscal year 22 budget. And Keith Stray is with us. I'm going to share my screen and can everybody see what we've got here? And do I need to make it larger for people to read it? Okay. So you'll recall we had a discussion on the budget, made some decisions about allocations and use of various funds at the September meeting of the executive committee. Since that, we've got further refinement. We're highlighting the changes that have taken place between the September meeting of the executive committee and today. Some of those highlights include asking both highway and human services to find approximately $300,000 in cuts, which they did. We got a little bit more in sales tax revenue than we were originally budgeting, as well as for state shared revenue. We reduced a little bit what we had put down for the county board budget. Keith, do you want to address the increase in general fund balance applied real quick?
Sure. When I was preparing this, updating this, it was really to balance out that first section of adjustments that needed to be made to cover the $700,000. That was simply a factor as we entered all of the changes that were agreed upon at the last meeting. It was found that there was more or less double credit given towards or a misunderstanding that there was an additional $700,000 that really wasn't available for debt. So an adjustment had to be made to bring that in line. Then there's another budget, our fund balance applied one more row down from where Paul's at right now, 33,000. And that's again balancing the lines above. We had additional revenue come in, but we also had to make a transition or transfer of fund balance where it was coming from to comply with levy limits restrictions, and that pertains to the debt service exclusion. If you claim the exclusion or exemption for levy limits for paying debt, you have to use all of that levy for debt payments. So that was the adjustment there. The original budget did propose or at least identify that as a potential funding source, but in balancing this all out now, that had happened. Looking at that additional 33,000, you look over at the total fund balance of unassigned fund balance of 1,558,000 and change, that still is above the 35% target. If you recall last year, to balance a budget, we actually had to go down to 30%. So this meets your goal to get back up to that 35%, and we're still projecting to be above it.
So we have there were a couple, what we have explained a number of times is that different information comes in at different times. We get updates, we get corrections. We've had a couple here that really didn't affect the levy portion of the budget at all. But the bottom line is here. This is a balanced budget. And so what I want to go to next is, if I can get this to leave me alone. Oh, why does that do that? Go away. Okay, this is a summary on the fund balance applied. You can see how we updated it.
It's not showing, Paul.
Huh? It's not showing?
No.
All right, my new share. Let's do it that way. All right, let's see. What do you see now?
Yep.
What's on your screen now?
It's showing everything but the right-hand side, so you'll have to scooch it over.
All right. I am not expert at this. I'm going to stop share and I'm going to try to do it this way. Okay, let's see. Now do we see it?
That's better.
Yes.
Okay. This is the spreadsheet that we'd shown you before, showing the use of the fund balance to balance the budget. It's just been updated with the new numbers. And then the last thing I want to go to is this one. Okay, let's see if I can share again my screen. All right, can you see this one?
Yes.
All right. This is the budget summary as we have put it together. So this shows you all the various revenue sources, the amounts of the fund balance, for instance, that's being applied, again, that same amount, where the various sources of revenue and the expenditures. Here's our bottom line. Again, this is a balanced budget. We're maintaining the not more than $3 million in borrowing. We are applying in this budget 3.2 million of ARPA funds for highway. That's above and beyond the borrowing that we're doing. And this does roll in the update comp class numbers for salaries, as well as the new costs associated with the change in benefits. Comp class is one of the last things we were working, specifically Keith was working quite late into the night last night because these numbers simply come in very late and they have to be updated. But the bottom line is this budget, as recommended, meets the goals per the discussion of the committee. It meets the goals of the county board with respect to CIP. And it is a balanced budget that addresses our various programs. We accommodate all the personnel requests. We accommodate the raises, again, roughly in the 5% range for most employees. And this is it's in front of the committee for discussion and action today. So Keith and I would be happy, and Heather as well, happy to try to field any questions you may have on the draft fiscal year budget.
Supervisor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul or Keith, can you give us some idea of the overall impact of the comp and class study on the final numbers? I know that there were changes. By the way, Keith, I noticed that message came in at 1 a.m. and shame on you for working all night, but thank you. We appreciate it. But I know that comp and class study was one of the last things to be factored in. Can you give us some indication of its impact?
Yeah, I can give you a real rough ballpark. And, because there's so many tentacles to that, but when we talked in September, we actually had that in there, and it was essentially close to $625,000. But what was a huge offset and a huge help to be able to make this work was that the HR team was able to, through the RFP process and updating benefits, mainly the health insurance, we had $703,000 of savings to help offset that cost. So, the two of those more or less canceled each other out in just a very general sense.
And I
Thank
will
you.
add that we do this fully recognizing that these salary adjustments, they carry forward into subsequent years. This is what we feel we are recommending staff needs to be done for us to be able just to get people in the door. We have experienced some difficulties with recruiting. We have experienced some difficulties with retention. We know we have to make these adjustments, and every year it gets harder. I don't know, none of us know what the market's going to do in terms of salaries, demands going forward. It doesn't look like it's going to get better, but this seems a prudent step to take.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor May.
Yeah, on the chart, the last chart you just showed, it showed the neighbors 87% occupancy. Is that what the average, is that the average of the occupancy, or what's the significance of that number?
You always have to set an occupancy rate for determining budget. You have to decide how much. With COVID, it's really tricky this year and projecting forward into next year. And then it's complicated by the availability of staff. Staffing at the neighbors is really becoming a critical issue. We're having some difficulty even getting pool or agency help in there. In any event, when the neighbors committee met, and Supervisor Johnson, chair of the neighbors committee, can certainly add to any of this that he may feel appropriate. When they met, we did talk about the occupancy rate that we should budget for. The 87%, there was some discussion, maybe it's a bit too conservative. The original proposal was a little higher, but the 87 is what the neighbors committee ended up feeling comfortable in budgeting for. Remember, this is budget. Reality is something else, and we're going to have to adjust to reality, not only with respect to the number of referrals we may get, our ability to accept referrals, depending on whether or not we have an outbreak of COVID in a given neighborhood, and staffing. So it's going to be a juggling act, I think, this coming year.
Any
Supervisor
other,
Johnson, I don't know if there's anything else.
No, that's about it.
any other questions? Well, I have one, and that I've been trying to figure out, and maybe you can help me, I hope, is when we did our capital improvement plan, we're going to borrow $3 million for capital improvements per year. And we had those listed. And we went through the committee meetings, and the committees cut about 960,000 or so out of that. 950. And we're still borrowing $3 million. And we can't use borrowing for operations in anything. So what are we spending that extra $1 million on? Not quite $1 million.
We applied that to highway, to road maintenance and construction. There was a greater ask for maintenance and construction than we had possible for borrowing, and even greater than we could cover with the $3.2 million allocation of ARPA funds.
So we're still giving the same amount in levy because we have to do that.
Right.
And we're adding an extra $1 million in borrowing to put on the roads,
Yes.
along with the 3.2 from ARPA.
Yes, it boils down to a rather large increase when you put it all together. But as you and I think everybody on this committee knows, we're also way behind the 8 ball with respect to road maintenance and construction, where we have an average lifespan of 75 years for a road. It's just not sustainable. So a lot of this is catch up. A lot of it too is driven by those state projects where we get state share, 80-20 shares. We don't want to cut those. That's bad. That's bad management. You want to take advantage of those. But when we apply the money to those, that didn't leave enough for other non-state share projects and road maintenance. You know, your chip seals and shoulder work and things of that nature. Keith, is there anything I left out on that?
No, you're spot on. The levy that's available for road maintenance and road projects continues to go down because the cost for those go up, and the levy at going into highway has been pretty much flatlined for years, and there's no fund balance anymore to make up any deficits. Yeah, that's it. That's where it went.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I don't have a question. I wonder if our county manager should at least inform. We have a few new supervisors that might not know that under libraries, this is recommended at 100% funding. And I know last year somebody brought it up to reduce that, and I'm glad to see it's at 100%. However, they need to know that really doesn't help us balance the budget. What do you think, County Manager Paul? Do they need to understand that?
I suspect Supervisor Anderson, that now that you've said that, they understand it. It is a good point, and it is a question we always have. We're not mandated to do 100%. I think that we have always valued the library systems that serve our populace, and to the extent that we're able to do so, we've traditionally done so. We may find ourselves in the future when we feel we can't, but I'm glad that this budget, this draft budget, at least manages that full request for those in-county libraries.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget? All right. I guess we can move on. Let's see. Do we have to?
Dave, this is
Supervisor
Vaughn.
Hedlund.
You're muted, Vaughn.
Thank you. I clicked the wrong thing here. Just one question back to what you were referring to on highway. Are we pretty confident in that we have enough set in that budget if we run into another nasty winter like we did a couple years ago?
That
Are
is,
we averaging, or where are we at?
we do look back at the past 3 to 5 years for snow plowing and winter maintenance and regular maintenance as well. As I'm sure you can appreciate, it's very much a crystal ball, and not to make a bad pun, but it's a very snowy crystal ball. So you do the best you can. We can never predict that we're going to have, whether or not we're going to have a winter like we did in 19, where we got nailed in February. But yes, we do look back and try to average. We try to look at the almanacs and the weather predictions as much as possible, but it's very much a guessing game.
I don't think that's a crystal ball. I think that's a snow globe.
Yes, potato.
Any other questions before we move on? If not, we'll move on to number 6, considerations of actions to be taken by the executive committee. Recommendation on the FY 2022 Dunn County budget and levy. So is our mill rate's going down, right?
Yes, that's correct. Looking back at that email I sent out middle of September, yes, right now the calculated mill rate is going down. based on our equalized value and then the limited amount that we can raise our taxes on the levy limit law.
Any questions? If not, I need a motion for this to move it on to county board.
Mr. Chairman, I so move.
All right, Supervisor Anderson moves, Supervisor McCullough seconds. Any discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. All right, consideration of reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee. Resolution approving the FY 2021 budget adjustment for administration, public health, human services, and sheriff's department. I need a motion on this.
I'll move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Morehouse moves. Supervisor Headland seconds. Keith, are you going to speak to this also?
Yes, I will, Mr. Chair. Thank
All
you.
right.
This budget adjustment resolution, if passed, would increase the 2021 budget by a total of $342,201. It's a combination of requests from multiple departments for additional funding that has been received, whether it's donations or grant allocations. And the narrative in the background information gives you the specifics on those. It's also involving one reallocation for a technology project for the boardroom audio system. So it would have no impact on the current year tax levy.
And has been recommended by each of the oversight committees that oversee each of those departments, recommended for approval.
Any questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Resolution passes. All right, review of reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the county board from the standing committees, from Judiciary and Law Committee, and ordinance amending the County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 7, Section 6.02 regarding child support fees. Supervisor Tripp, are you going to speak to this, or do you want Josie to speak to this? I see she's here.
Yeah, and she can certainly chime in if I get it wrong, but basically this is an opportunity to recoup some of the cost involved in non-4D cases that are not reimbursed by the federal government. This is an effort to satisfy the request of county management that departments look for additional sources of revenue. This is not going to balance our budget, but the Judiciary Committee considered it to be a pretty equitable opportunity for those people who choose this route to pay for the service they're asking for. And I'll let Josie explain further. Nick did a nice job of summarizing the issue, by the way, in the packet, in the information that's in the packet. So, Josie?
Sure, I would agree that Attorney Lang did a great job sort of summarizing it in the cover letter. There are cases, they're called non-4D cases, that the child support agency is not tasked with monitoring. So there's no caseworker who's checking in on compliance and doing any of that. But the orders still have to be entered into our system. The money still flows through our trust fund and so forth. So I did reach out to my colleague in Eau Claire, who Eau Claire passed a similar ordinance in April, I believe. And she said they've only collected about $100 in fees since then. So it isn't a huge moneymaker. And the reason being is because the people have a choice. They don't have to pay the fee, they could apply for our services, which they can do for free. And if they do that, the case becomes a 40 case, and then they get a case manager. So I think many people, when they're given the options, they'll just take the free application for child support services. The benefit of that is that it keeps our caseload high, which means we get a bigger share of state general purpose revenue for Dunn County. And statistically, they're better paying cases. So that also helps in the performance side of things.
Any questions? If not, thank you. Let's see, moving on. 8B, Committee on Administration, a resolution rescinding resolutions 2018-63 and 2018-71 regarding the ENS director. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Supervisor Quinn isn't here today. Is there any questions? I'm sure County Manager Miller can answer any questions, or probably Supervisor Morehouse is on that committee also. Any questions? Not? All right, moving on. Also from the Administration Committee, resolution amending the Dunn County, or wait, I'm probably wrong on what committee that's from. With too many papers. It is.
It is.
Resolution amending the Dunn County Handbook regarding holidays. Supervisor Headland, you want to speak to this?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. The HR department did a review and study of what the counties in the area were doing in terms of total number of holidays that were granted to the employees. And the study showed that we were amongst the low or the lowest. And so it was determined that we should at least add one more day to get ourselves up to at least an average of what our fellow counties in the area are doing. And so it was recommended that we use Martin Luther King Day, which is a pretty general accepted day, as our 10th day instead of just 9. And so that's what this resolution is about, is changing the handbook to recognize one more paid holiday for our employees.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Questions?
if I may add, Mr. Chairman, it has to do with, again, recruitment and to a lesser extent with retention. We also made certain to check with the courts, and the courts are closed on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so there's no conflict.
Any questions? Supervisor Johnson?
I just have one. What day is the spring holiday celebrated on?
That varies. It tends to fall on Good Friday. Tends to be consistent with that. It's always a Friday in April. I think this past year it was April 9. Don't quote me.
Okay, thanks. Just
Yeah.
wanted to know.
Any other questions? All right, reports from standing committees. I'll start as I see them on my screen. Supervisor Maves, Facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our last meeting was on September 22nd, and it's pretty much business as usual. Nothing really breakaway stuff. The cars that we were supposed to be swapping out for the fleet, here again, the manufacturers haven't even built them yet because of the chip shortage. So when they do get built and shipped, we will be replacing some of the cars in the fleet. Up in Sandcrick, we're going to have to put a new well in for the Myron Park up there because of nitrate levels. But the village in the town of Sandcrick are actually going to do that. So it's not going to cost the county anything. So that's greatly appreciated by the residents up there. And otherwise, yeah, things are pretty much business as usual. This morning, we did have our first energy subcommittee meeting as far as how we're going to move forward to make the county compliant with the carbon resolution for 2050. And so we had a great discussion. And so that's in the works. And the next meeting will be on October 27th. That's my report.
Thank you. Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the Administration Committee met on the 23rd of September. And obviously part of the things that we discussed were employee handbook changes. As a result of that, we brought forward the recommendation for adding the additional day off. We talked about a day for training and whether or not we could that could be worked into the employee's schedule this year, where there would be a day of training that would hopefully work for most of the departments. Along with that, approved the payment of the vouchers and did schedule our next meeting to be, if I get it right here, the 28th of October. And then I guess I have one question for our county manager. Last year, we moved up our December meeting. Are we going to be looking forward to making that adjustment?
Yes, I would anticipate we'll do the same thing, talk about instead of meeting at the end of November, and then the end of December meeting instead early in December for both.
Okay. Beyond that, I guess unless Jim, if there's anything else that you can remember, I think that's the gist of what we covered and brought forward to be considered. We brought forward the recommendation from the committee as far as the ENS position being staff position being removed. We had a lot of discussion on that issue, and we decided that we wanted to bring it forward to the county board because obviously it's something that their committee had worked on and decided that this adjustment needed to be made. We felt there were some arguments for not doing it, but we wanted to pass it on so that the whole county board could hear both sides of that issue and make a proper and informed decision. That's all I have. Thank you.
Supervisor Tripp, Judiciary and Law.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Judiciary and Law met on September 27th. And much like the other committees, pretty much business as usual. A couple of interesting points. The DA is going to prepare for, or is preparing for 2 murder trials that will be held this summer as a result of the homicide near Downsville. I think that was about a year ago already. One of the reasons that it's taking so long is the defense has requested additional time to prepare. The sheriff reported that Ramsey County and the city of St. Paul has taken over the investigation on the homicides that resulted in the 4 bodies being discovered in Sheridan Township. And so the sheriff was relieved to let that go. There could still be charges of having something to do with the bodies, but the main thrust of that is now out of our hands. Sheriff also reported that he's having a really difficult time recruiting people for employment. It's we've got contract negotiations coming up with the union deputies, and the sheriff is well. The facts are pretty obvious, and HR knows this as well as anybody. It's tough getting people now, and when you're looking for specialized talent like we would be for the sheriff's department, that's increasingly difficult. So that was one of the topics of conversation. Both our new judges are in the courtrooms on their benches and have begun work. And I think that's pretty much it. Our next meeting will be towards the end of October. And again, nothing too far out of the ordinary. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Anderson, CRT.
Thank you, Chairman Bartlett. Our CRT meeting was September 13th, which was after our last executive meeting. And as always, we have a report from one of our extension specialists. And at this meeting, we heard some Addison Bang, and you will all remember that at one time Addison Bang was here in Dunn County as in our Land and Water Conservation Division, and is now back again working with Chip Eau Claire and Dunn County, basically a third of his time in each county. And so we talked to Addison a little bit about with some experience with broadband. And it was at that time we determined that we would have a special meeting, which we had last week, which our County Manager Miller and our County Board Chairman Bartlett and I and Addison Bang attended. And it was a very a good meeting to talk about how UW Extension might be able to help us in the process of leadership and here in Dunn County. And so I was very pleased with that meeting, and we will keep you informed as to how that goes. That's basically it from me, Mr. Chairman. Our next meeting then will be on the second Monday of November, which I think is, again, the day before our county board meeting. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Johnson, the neighbors.
Thank you, Chairman Bartlett. Our last meeting was the 13th of September. Administrator Flunker provided the committee with updates from the Quality Assurance Committee. There was 11 new staff members hired and 8 resigned. Staffing continues to be a major concern. We were provided with a status update of the CNA training program, wages and retention issues at the facility as well. Adjustments to the orientation schedules to accommodate students was discussed. Arrowhead remains closed. At the end of August, the census was at 108. The facility continues to take admissions at this time, but it depends on staffing if they continue. COVID testing for all staff is semi-weekly, and our next meeting will be October 21st, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Morehouse, Health and Human Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee last met on September 23rd. We had our normal reports from Veteran Services and Public Health. As Mr. Miller has alluded, the COVID situation is reasonably bleak. At that point, we were dealing with an average of 28 cases a week, which is beyond the capacity of the health department to contact trace. And a lot of the contact tracing, because about 30% of those cases, unlike the last round, are occurring in young people under the age of 18. And a lot of the contact tracing is made more difficult by school district policies and so on. And at that point, we had 2 more deaths. I believe the unfortunate total now is 42. And our vaccination rates are still pretty stagnant. So that was reasonably depressing. We did give Katie the opportunity to leave the meeting slightly early so she could continue to work for the rest of the night on pressing public health issues. Our staff is really overworked, and they are just doing such a wonderful job of trying to keep up with all of this. So thank yous would be appreciated. We also had a really excellent report from Chris Corpola, looking at some of the impacts of the work of the Department of Human Services, and a particularly interesting 8-year look at budgets and use of levy by the Human Services Department, which we would be happy to share with any of you if you're interested. From 2015 to the projected 2022, our expenses have increased from like $9.5 million a year to 14.2, but our use of levy has increased just 3.3%. It's 124,700 and whatever dollars. And for the last 2 years, and we certainly are projecting for 2021 that there will be a return of funds to the general fund. So that was very helpful. If any of you are interested in having a look at that, I would be happy to forward it to you. We reviewed vouchers. We approved the budget adjustments and a resolution on room and board fees for crisis patients. And our next meeting is October 28th. That's my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor McCullough, Highway and Transit.
We have not met since the last exec committee, so I have nothing to report on new meetings, and our next meeting will be 1 week from today.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for the reports. We have no other business. Our next meeting is early in November, November 3rd. It's probably the first Wednesday.
Yes.
So keep that in mind. And as Mr. Miller mentioned before, County Board is early also. It's a second Tuesday on the 9th. So any other announcements before we adjourn? Supervisor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you all undoubtedly know, the libraries in Dunn County belong to the IFLS library system. The director is John Thompson, and I am pleased to announce that John Thompson was named as the Wisconsin Library Association Librarian of the Year.
Wow. It's pretty good. Anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Morehouse.
I just have an impertinent question. Is this the most rapid executive committee budget meeting ever?
It might be. It went pretty smooth.
If I may, Mr. Chair, we mentioned the hard work being done by a number of departments and divisions. Public health has been doing Herculean work during COVID. The staff at the neighbors is working overtime very hard in very challenging circumstances. Our jailers dealing with COVID with the inmates and our sheriff's department. But I want to acknowledge the considerable amount of hard work done by our finance director and his staff and our HR director and her staff. The work involved in pulling these budgets together is not getting easier. It's becoming more complicated. This year, we not only had to do a budget, but we had to roll in a comp class study, which magnified the effort and the difficulty, coupled with the fact that, as you all know, different bits of critical information come into us at different times, and we find ourselves having to adjust and readjust and readjust. Every time, for instance, we touch salaries and benefits, our PEP, it's considerable amount of work. And so Supervisor Tripp noted that the email from our CFO, Keith Stray, came in early this morning. Everybody is professionals. They know that this sometimes happens. happens. We have to put in this extra work, but I wanted to take the time to acknowledge the very hard work of those teams in pulling the budget together.
Absolutely.
All right, well said. Anything else? If not, we'll